Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Debra Hallos, and I'll be closing us out today with a workshop on secondary traumatic stress and self-care. I'm the interventions manager for the National Native Children's Trauma Center, housed at the University of Montana in Missoula. I'm calling you today from beautiful Kalispell, Montana, which is north of Missoula and adjacent to Glacier National Park. So I've been scrolling through and seeing some familiar names. So hello, and good for everyone. I'm so happy that everyone decided to join us today. What we'll be focusing on is a few definitions on understanding not only secondary traumatic stress, but some related concepts in the world of self-care. We'll take some time thinking about how some warning signs of secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue may be affecting us as caregivers and professionals. And then we'll learn some strategies to mitigate this stress. So to begin with some definitions, there are so many out there. They're all somewhat different, but very related. So one definition of secondary traumatic stress from Figley, who's really one of the pioneers in addressing secondary traumatic stress, and especially how it applies to those in the helping profession, defines it as the natural and consequent behaviors and emotions resulting from knowing about a traumatizing event experienced by a significant other, the stress resulting from helping or wanting to help a traumatized or suffering person. So I think that that end piece is what is important to me as someone who's been a mental health therapist for over the last 20 years. It's just that, desire to want to help and be in a position of figuring things out does come with it some inherent risk factors. So let's talk just a little bit about what the connection is between secondary traumatic stress and PTSD. So what we've found in recent decades is that those of us who work with children, families, communities who have suffered a trauma, we can, just by being part of their story and being in a position to help, we could be suffering symptoms very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And these include recurrent, involuntary, and intrusive re-experiencing. So re-experiencing, an example could be like a flashback, which is not only a memory, but it's a memory with all of the physiological reactions as if that memory was happening. So as caregivers, we can actually have those re-experiencing symptoms of trauma that our clients have had, or trauma that we're aware of, trauma that we've learned about. We might be responding to people, places, things that remind us of our student or client's trauma. And we might try to avoid thinking about the client's trauma. We might avoid that client or that family in general, or things that are associated with the client or the family, or reminders of the trauma that client or family suffered. So some other similarities is with secondary traumatic stress, as with PTSD, there can be negative changes in how we think. So we might start to have very unhelpful, jump to worst case scenario, anxiety provoking type of thoughts. It can impact our mood. We can have feelings like guilt, survivor guilt. We could have feelings of hypervigilance and anxiety, or anger, feeling angry for no reason. So all of these are not only symptoms of secondary traumatic stress, but of PTSD as well. Another very similar concept is compassion fatigue. So there are several compassion fatigue and compassion stress definitions that I think are helpful. So one is that it's the perceived demands derived from experiencing the suffering of others and wanting to help relieve this in some way. So it's the stress of knowing someone is in a psychological distress and wanting to help. Or the experience of short-term exhaustion and traumatic stress reactions associated with exposure to the suffering of one's clients. The weariness that comes from caring is another definition. So I'm sure many of you have felt that fatigue or just that exhaustion at the end of the day, at the end of the week, just from the very act of trying to be in a position of helping. So it's just like an overall fatigue. Maybe you're not functioning on your A game as much. Things seem more difficult. You're more tired, easier to anger or brought to tears. So definition that we don't want to overlook, and we'll be talking about a little bit later, is compassion satisfaction. So that's the perceived joy that we get from helping. You know, many of us are in this field because we have that compassion satisfaction. We understand that it's hard, but there are those moments in time that allow us to continue to do what we do. And compassion satisfaction and really tapping in to our own compassion satisfaction can also help us combat some of those other definitions that I was discussing earlier. So it can really help decrease compassion fatigue and STS by focusing on compassion satisfaction. So another definition is vicarious traumatization. So that impacts how we feel about ourselves, others, and the world. So it starts to, I guess, erode or impact our internal belief system. So, for instance, you know, maybe before being in a role of being a caregiver, working with youth, you had a sense that most people were good. Most people did the right thing, but after so many experiences, maybe your inner self has changed to thinking that more people are bad than good, or people can't be trusted, people can't do the right thing. We can also start to feel inadequate ourselves, and it's just from that exhaustion, compassion fatigue, right, of putting ourselves out there every day, and just maybe not feeling like we're making a difference. We could start to internalize that as there's something wrong with me. I'm not a good enough therapist. I'm not a good enough helper. I'm not really meant to be working with youth. So vicarious traumatization really changes our worldview. And it's important to take a minute to think about how our worldview has been impacted so we can challenge some of those thoughts that we're having that are not helpful. So all of these definitions are very pertinent to those working in Indian country. There have not been a lot of studies to explore the impacts of secondary traumatic stress among American Indian and Alaska Native population. However, we can make some assumptions just knowing that American Indian children are more likely than any other race to experience violence. And due to the likelihood of trauma exposure, it's very likely that American Indian and Alaskan Native helping professions are impacted by secondary traumatic stress. So that's just like the sheer volume of people who have experienced a trauma. We can then, assume that those of us working with those people are impacted by secondary traumatic stress. Yes, and then just to kind of continue down the road of difficult topics, we'll talk a little bit about what the impact of pandemic is on our self-care and our ability to be, or our tendency to be susceptible to secondary traumatic stress. So many of us are then in this helping profession, but have also have a real lived experience of pandemic and what that's done to us collectively as people, as helpers, what it's done to our families. So many folks might be worried about their own personal health or the health and safety of their loved ones, especially elderly loved ones. The pandemic has caused amongst the general population things like changes in sleeping or eating. So maybe being tired for no reason or not being able to sleep. Other information that's come out about the effects of the pandemic point to worsening chronic health conditions and worsening mental health conditions, as well as the increased use of substances. And when there has been a disruption in how we go about our lives, how we go about reaching out to others, disruption in our routine, all of those issues are exacerbated. So what might be some factors that are impacting you as a caregiver working with American Indian youth and Alaskan Natives? We know that there are a few formal resources to treat secondary traumatic stress. I remember being a young therapist working in rural Montana, in a American Indian community, just being in the throes of secondary traumatic stress myself and not having any idea where to turn to or where to go. And I would find myself at one of the local churches, trying to help recover, trying to find some guidance. So there's not typically a lot of formal resources, although I think we are getting better. And I think organizations are learning to support their staff members, having an increased understanding that they might be suffering from secondary traumatic stress, and then trying to provide some resources. But we also know that if communities as a whole can just be overtaxed because they're trying to respond to so much trauma, and then the collective effects of historical trauma continues to just impact recovering from secondary traumatic stress. Also, if you are working within the community, folks that have that dual relationship, I think, have a special challenge in taking care of themselves, because not only are they helpers in the community, but they're community members themselves. So it's impacting them vicariously and also very personally, as they live some of the same experiences that those they're trying to help live. So those are some definitions, and I promise that we will move on to more mitigation strategies. A part of being trauma aware, I think, is understanding how secondary traumatic stress can be impacting us. And so the next two slides, I have some examples about what those personal impacts are of secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue or vicarious traumatization. And what I'll ask you to do is I will remain quiet for a few minutes, and I would like for you to look at the three categories here on the slide: physical, emotional, and behavioral, and see if you can identify maybe some of the symptoms or some of the, reactions that you might be having in these three categories. You could just either have them come to the forefront of your mind, or you could jot them down if you work a little bit better by writing. So I'll be quiet and I'll just ask you to do some internal awareness here for a few minutes. Let's move on to the next slide. 3 more categories: cognitive, interpersonal, and spiritual. Go ahead and look at these 3 categories in the examples underneath and spend a little bit of time thinking about how your work has impacted you on the cognitive level, interpersonal, and spiritual. Okay, so I hope you all have been able to take a little bit of an inventory. It's good to take that inventory because when we know what things are cropping up for us, then we're better able to develop a self-care action plan to help mitigate those things. So who is vulnerable to secondary traumatic stress? And this is what the research has shown, is that those who are empathic, those of us who show a lot of empathy and that we relate to others are more susceptible. If you have lived experience yourselves, you can be more susceptible. And those who work directly with children and are in a position to hear their stories or hear their painful experiences, and those who help others and often neglect or unaware of their own feelings and needs. So there are some folks that are better than others at realizing how the work could be impacting them. Some people are a little bit better at saying no, or maybe not now, knowing that you first have to take care of yourself before you're in a position to help others. So I think amongst the helping profession, there might be a little bit of like misguided pride, if you will, in the ability to continue to take things on. So that person with the fuller plate wins, or maybe there's some sort of inner drive to take on more than we can chew. And in doing that, we're not having some boundaries up between like what's good for us and what we can handle does make us more susceptible to secondary traumatic stress. And so the previous slides where I had you think about how is this work impacting you? It's of course helpful to do an interpersonal search and think about it. But sometimes we're not the best at identifying. So then there are a few things to help us. So there are some formal assessments that you could take. The first one is the secondary traumatic stress scale. And the second one is the professional quality of life scale, the ProQual, which is one of my favorite self-assessments. So the ProQual really ascertains where you are when it comes to secondary traumatic stress, burnout, but then also compassion satisfaction. So it measures the satisfaction that you're getting from your job, because remember that could offset some of the secondary traumatic stress. The secondary traumatic stress scale focuses a little bit more on those symptoms of STS that are closely connected to post-traumatic stress disorder. So the ProQual can be taken for free online, and you could also self-score. So it's a free assessment that you can take at your own pace, and then also you can be able to score it yourself. So another resource for identifying how we're doing are our significant others, right? So we might rate ourselves as doing fairly well, but it's good to check in with your spouse, check in with your children, check in with your parents, and ask them how they think you're doing. You might ask, have you noticed any changes since I started doing this work? Is there anything that you're concerned about? How well do you think I'm able to cope with stress? Because asking those people that love us, sometimes we'll get a more honest or objective answer. So what I would like you to do, and it is difficult to do this via Zoom, but there are a couple options. We'll do some more internal thinking, right? So, using the 4 directions, I want you to think about how your work has been affected: physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. So the first part of the presentation was to go over some of those symptoms or signs. And so what I would ask you to do is think about and jot down how you've been impacted. And then what are some steps that you've already taken to be more in balance? So more balanced. So more balanced would be, feeling like you've taken care of all of the realms of your being. Balanced as far as being able to leave work at home, to focus on family when you're with your family, to focus on community when you're with your community. So this is typically a small group activity, but what I'll ask you to do is take some time to think about or write about. If you would like to be courageous and share some of the impacts in chat, it would be helpful for us to hear, right? Because it's always nice to hear that other people are impacted. It helps to validate our experiences. So if you do feel comfortable sharing answers to either of the questions, how has my work altered my sense of balance? Or what have I done to be more balanced? Please put that in the chat. And we want to go back. So I'll give a good 3 to 5 minutes to think about this activity.
Deb, there was a question in the chat about the training being for staff or for the defendants. I think it means the juvenile participants. I was just going to share this specific training that we're sharing as part of this event is really to help you as staff members, but I think self-care is really important for youth to learn as well. So that's definitely something that could be carried forward in their work with the youth that are coming into their juvenile healing and wellness courts. So that's what I was going to share. You might, if you wanted to clarify that, I saw that question in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. I saw that question too. So yeah, so module 8 is really focusing on the caregiver, how you can take care of yourself. And there's always the hope that as you're learning mitigation strategies to take care of your own stress, it could be something that is passed on to the defendants that you work with. So potentially there are skills that you might gain from this workshop that you'd be able to share with those that you work with. Yes, and I really appreciate the comment of trying to spend time outside, getting fresh air, walking, running, etc. So that's a nice way to take care of oneself and bring oneself back into balance. So there's actually been some research to indicate that just the spending time outside, like being outside for as little as 10 minutes can reduce your blood pressure. So another comment on trying to be more in balance is taking breaks from the computer and intentionally exercising. Oh, and thanks, Giselle, for taking walks and getting some nice warmth from the sun. Oh, I love that vitamin D. I don't get enough of it in Montana. Yeah, sunlight and fresh air. And I'm definitely with some of you about hiking. In fact, I'm planning on going for a hike today after work. Oh, someone is hiking with waterfalls. That sounds beautiful. Okay, well, thanks for taking a minute to identify what you're already doing to take some steps into becoming more balanced. And hopefully by the end of our time, you'll have even more ideas and a plan that you'd be willing to follow. So we'll also spend just a few minutes talking about organizational stress. We work in difficult settings, and we're not always, able to control the stress that is part of the setting in which we work. And so it then becomes a bit of a challenge to navigate those settings. Here's some definitions of organizational stress. So it can create workplaces that increase the likelihood staff are exposed to stress and directly exposed to trauma and experience secondary traumatic stress. So trauma-informed system is actually one, if they're following the 4 R's from SAMHSA, a trauma-informed system not only recognizes the widespread issue of trauma, it realizes that the trauma can be treated and is hopeful, and it is able to respond to those using their system that have experienced trauma. Then it also works to resist re-traumatizing of not only the people they serve, but staff members as well. So when organizations fail to create the safety, it can increase our direct exposure to trauma and STS. So I am curious to learn a little bit about what some organizational stressors are that you all have. Here are just some examples. Most of these, again, are things that we can't control. Sometimes they're things that the organization can't control. Some examples are budget cuts and pay losses, layoffs, unsupportive coworkers and leadership. Like lawsuits can impact an entire system, or investigations or audits, a facility closing or a high caseload. So these stressors can lead to difficulties like increased absenteeism at work, impaired judgment, and willingness to accept extra work. So people just feeling they can't be a team player because they're just so overwhelmed. A low motivation, lower productivity, and poor quality of work, friction among staff members, feelings of moral distress, like maybe there's something happening that you have a cognitive dissonance with, that it goes against your morals or your belief system. So again, I know it's somewhat difficult, but I am curious if folks would like to share what are some specific stressors that are part of your organization, or part of just the work you do that you face on a consistent basis? Does anybody want to share what some of those stressors are?
Yeah, I could chime in, Deborah. So stressors like something, I don't know, I'm like thinking about how stressful this really is. But no, like a lot of the stressors, like I'll just bring it to today. So part of one of my stressors today is that I know that there's a group of children that are being harassed by law enforcement, and I'm trying to figure out how to help them. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. I've been, and the kids, they message me, they tell me what's going on. They're 4 hours away from me. I try to drive out there, spend a couple of days with them just to ease their mind a little bit. And that's a big stressor for me because those are just really hard systems to navigate and to try to like tell them it's gonna, that it could be okay. And they've already expressed, people has told them that it was gonna be okay and it's not, it's getting worse. So like you don't want to be one more person to say it's gonna be okay, even though you want it for them.
Mhm.
And you're trying to, keep hope alive, but at the same time, you feel bad because you don't want to leave. They don't want you to leave. They want you to stay there with them. And so sometimes like it's hard and sometimes those things take a lot of time, take time away from me and my own kids. And then I might come
Mhm.
back to my kids and then not be fully present because I'm still worried about getting back to people or getting a response or making another phone call or so like that's some of like today's stresses, just trying to figure out what to do with some of that and then just trying to mentally survive some of that. So like I made a commitment to myself today to take a salt bath because like I was taught that those really help with like releasing emotions. Like if I've picked up emotions that aren't necessarily mine, it could help clean some of that off. So I try to do I should get out and walk a little bit more. So like I know that that works, but it's like I'm usually like talking or on the phone or in the house all the time or on the road. So it's just, yeah, but that I just wanted to share a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is a lot of a stress for one day. I love the idea of a salt bath. And so some of the stressors that I've heard, and I wonder if they are, common, is just, sometimes it's just like the distance and not being right there. And then like it's the worry because you want to be able to help, but you're not entirely certain how to solve it, and doing just whatever you can think of to make a difference. And that's an uneasy feeling, of wanting to help, but maybe not having the answers right in front of you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure that others have had similar experiences. Thank you. Does anybody else care to share some of their work stressors, either via chat or by chiming in?
Debra, I'll let you answer Giselle's quick, but I did want to follow up with something.
Yeah. So Giselle, thank you for adding just the constant changes, which leads to taking on more job duties, workload. So just kind of a disruption maybe in roles and needing to take more on your plate, it sounds like.
I wanted to say I think one of the things brought up in the former modules was the 24-hour expectations, being on the clock all the time, especially dealing with youth who are confronting issues at 2 or 3 in the morning. I think that can lead to a lot of organizational stress, a lot of turnover amongst staff.
Yeah, when you're always on, it's hard to remain balanced. Yeah, good point. Thank you all so much for being willing to bring these issues up and talk about them. Are there any more that people would like to share?
I know for myself, having worked over a couple of grant cycles, is you can tell the stress might go up for a team when they know the funding cycle is coming to an end, and there's that anticipation that you may have additional funding, you might not have additional funding, and so you see, certain individuals on the project might step off because they need to look for other work. So that leaves others to kind of carry the load until they know if they're going to be refunded or if they're going to have additional funding. So I know that's a challenge across the board with grant funded programs.
Yeah, thanks. We felt that too, our organization in the past, right? When you work on soft money, it can be precarious to say the least, because there's so much more that you want to do, but you rely on a funding source to be able to do it. So there are some organizational assessments. As if you're in a position of being an administrator in your organization, or if you're in the position of contributing to, a formal type of assessment, if you have some clout, basically, with your organization, these are some assessments that can be helpful. Just to give a little bit of a, I guess, take the temperature to see how well an organization is responding to that psychological and physical safety of their staff members, and trying to respond to secondary traumatic stress and reduce re-traumatization. So the secondary traumatic stress informed organization assessment can be accessed online. There are like 9 realms that this organizational assessment looks at and asks, and multiple staff members take and respond to the organization. If you are interested, there's some more information on the screen about how to access this particular assessment. And I think too, that's the formal assessment. When we talk about mitigation strategies, I think it's very important to bring up what an organization can do just informally to see if their workers are okay. What can organizations do to see if their workers are okay? Does anybody have any examples right now, just, off the top of their head, either an organization that they belong to now or have worked with in the past, where they've just gone the extra mile, or maybe just even done what's expected and checked in with workers, or tried to develop some wellness within the organization to support workers? Does anybody have examples of that? So it's more of like the informal assessment or informal resources that an organization provides.
Yeah, I do some work for an organization called Community Change. And they were really great. We're a part of a women's fellowship, Women of Color Fellowship. And through that fellowship and through that organization, both working with them and being one of the women in the fellowship, what they did was they assigned us a somatics coach. And so what was nice about having the somatics coach was it was a really great way for us to be healthier in our leadership. And so I felt that was them really putting in the extra mile to make sure, well, in order to be a part of this fellowship, you also have to keep a commitment to like sessions like somatics or, something else. And I thought that was really helpful because of the practitioner themselves. They had a lot of character, a lot of personality. And it really helped, I think, me like kind of process more of what was going on with me and my body. So it wasn't like just therapy. It was like really intentionally connected, because oftentimes doing the work, like I'll leave my body, right? Like I'm not really in it. I'm like outside of it somewheres and trying to make that connection back to it. So I thought that was really great.
I think that's great too. That's an awesome example. Thank you. And then Anna shared that her state bar association offers 6 free hours of crisis counseling and has a hotline for attorneys. That's great. The Montana University system offers crisis counseling as well, and also wellness coaching. So if someone is trying to lose weight, decrease blood pressure, or be aware of painful joints, that they have access to coaching, like, is super important. And I think just really maybe an organization that is able just to respond to in the moment crisis, like having someone that you can take out with, someone to give a relief, being able to read coworkers and others in the room to determine when someone does need a break or when someone isn't okay, and reaching out to learn more about what is going on with that person. Whatever reason, my computer is not really wanting to cooperate with me with slides, so my apologies. So I did want to spend some time today going over definitions and asking you all to really think about how secondary traumatic stress and organizational stress is impacting your well-being. And so we really need to have an increased understanding of that, because it provides us at times for an answer, or for at least a plan for an answer about how to mitigate that stress. And so we'll be focusing the rest of our time on mitigation strategies. So I think historically, self-care has been thought of as like a luxury, like, okay, yeah, I'll take care of myself when all my work is done. You know, as a mom, you're like, okay, I'll take care of myself when my kids' needs are met, maybe when they're sleeping, you know, then I'll go ahead and focus on myself, right? So it's a luxury. But what we're trying to do is move that mindset to where self-care is not a luxury, but that self-care is an ethical imperative. That is, we have an obligation to ourselves, to our loved ones, to our community, and to those we serve to take care of ourselves and not be damaged by the work we do. So this is the picture, and of course we all, I was just got off a plane last week, and there's the same instructions that you've heard 1,000 times if you've ridden on a plane, right? So if the cabin were to lose pressure, oxygen masks will come, and you have to put your oxygen mask on first before helping someone, because you don't do much good if you're passed out, right? And so it's really the same philosophy, self-care. We need to move towards a mindset, it's a luxury, it's an extra, it's an ethical imperative to not only practice self-care, but to promote it amongst ourselves, amongst the people we serve, and amongst our organizations. And so with that same realm, we can't just do self-care when we have time, or when it fits into our schedule, or when it seems right. So we want to practice radical self-care. And radical self-care is intentionally and frequently creating opportunities for respite and replenishment. So we work it in, right? We program our phones or our watches to set an alarm, and after so many minutes of staring at the computer, we get up and we walk around. We get a drink of water. We schedule exercises if you're scheduling doctor appointments, that they're scheduled and we need to meet them. We're taking the time to do meditation, you know, deciding even to get up 15 minutes early to be in the quiet and to meditate. So it's radical in that it's intentional and frequent, and it's something that is prescribed and we stick to. When you are developing a self-care plan, right? And if we are really practicing radical self-care that is like very intentional and we're holding ourselves to it, it's very good to have it written down, what you've decided to do, and post it on your bathroom mirror or on your refrigerator, or better yet, tell a good friend, tell your spouse, tell your coworker, this is what I'm planning on doing, so they can help check in with you and hold you accountable. So what I'm hoping everybody will be willing to do today is to think about what their holistic plan for self-care is. So here's a little template, just what's on the slide, right? We want to think about our self-care from all of these realms because they're just so important to our well-being. How do we utilize our spirituality to take care of ourselves? How do we tie ourselves to our culture, to our ancestors, to our belief system to help sustain us? We can't isolate, right? So we know that isolation is one of the key factors in making us susceptible to secondary traumatic stress. So we need to be social beings. We need to be able to know how to reach out. We also need to be able to take care of our mental health. So maybe that's with developing some positive, helpful thoughts. Maybe it's with challenging ourselves by doing something new and exciting. We want to take care of our emotional health, right? So that could be journaling, it can be sharing and releasing of emotions. And of course, the physical piece, which is taking care of our bodies, drinking plenty of fluids, exercising, making sure we attend doctor, dentist, eye appointments. So this is what our wheel should look like. We all should have some ideas in these 6 rounds of ways that we can take care of ourselves. So let's think about some spiritual strategies for well-being. And, as we're going through these slides, there are just, very, very few examples that I've incorporated, but I'd love for you all to be filling in your wheel. So spirituality is different for everyone, but how are you personally taking care of your spiritual well-being? So it could be just being at one with nature, being outside. It could be prayer. It could be attending ceremony. What are you doing to take care of your spiritual well-being? And at this time, as we're going through, I would like to practice, some mitigation strategies. I will lead them, and if you're comfortable and interested, please follow along, but it's not expected because I do understand that everyone has their own way of recharging in their own belief system and connection. But what I'd like to do is lead us in a loving kindness exercise to promote positive coping. So this is a prayer that we at the National Native Children's Trauma Center wrote into one of our interventions for mitigating trauma in youth called CBITS for American Indian Youth, Cognitive Behavioral Intervention for Trauma in Schools for American Indian Youth. And I'd like to lead you in this exercise. So please feel free to listen to my voice and follow along if you're interested. So please find a comfortable position with your feet flat on the floor, your arms uncrossed, and your back straight. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes or just find a spot in front of your feet to look at. Let's take some deep breaths. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Let's practice that for a few rounds. In through your nose, out through your mouth. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Your breath is something that is always constant and something you can always use to ground yourself in the present moment. Keep breathing this way as we're going to practice sending ourselves some love and kindness. On your next in-breath, I want you to say to yourself in your mind, May I be safe. On this in-breath, say to yourself in your mind, may I be happy. On this in-breath, say to yourself, may I be healthy. On this in-breath, say to yourself, may I receive love. Keep breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Now let's share these kind and loving intentions to people who you care about. Think about the people or person you care about and love. Keep breathing in and out. On your next in-breath, I want you to say, may they be safe. Next, say, may they be happy. May they be healthy. May they receive love. Now let's share these kind and loving intentions to our community. Keep breathing, inhale through your nose and out through your mouth. And I want you to say in your mind with the next in-breath, may our community be safe. May our community be happy. May our community be healthy. May our community receive love. Take a few more deep breaths in and out. And when you're ready, you could open your eyes. How does everyone feel? Floyd shared with us that he learned some of this in college for Japanese studies. Yeah, so there's many ways. I'm glad some of you are feeling relaxed, right? So it's just that sometimes breathing and prayer is a nice combination. So what are some cultural strategies for well-being? Obviously it's going to be so different for everyone. There are some things that we do know that I think can transcend to multiple cultures, is just that denying ourselves of culture, not connecting to culture, can be really devastating. So we know that culture can serve as prevention. Culture is a protective factor against stress, including secondary traumatic stress. And culture identity is key in helping us to take care of our well-being. So this might look like a connection to ceremony. It might look like a connection to storytelling. It might look like a connection to art, right? Or connection, for me, it's been connecting to my culture is often centered around food, and how even eating a certain meal can, remind me of what I learned from my grandma. And does anyone else want to share some cultural strategies that they use for well-being before we move on? Remember, we're hoping this can populate your plan, right? For the youth that we work with, again, even when we're thinking about a trauma intervention, even a clinical trauma intervention that is like maybe written under the Western medicine philosophy, what we really do encourage is facilitators, counselors to invite people in to do smudging before group sessions. Invite people in to tell stories. Invite group members, to share how they have used or strength that they've gained from cultural strategies and pieces of their lives, and to share that with the greater group. I'm not a cultural expert, and I added this slide because I just really enjoy it, because I think it's a good reminder of how powerful medicine can be, how powerful nature can be. Janelle mentioned taking a salt bath as a nice coping strategy to release others' emotions. And so this slide, I guess, reminds us of those natural resources that we can use. So I'll just put it up here for a minute. The community I worked in years ago, it was at a school, and I felt so special. At the time I was a young pregnant woman, and my office was used often to light sweetgrass because of my condition, and so I always felt so special that I was like the sweetgrass office. And I know at the University of Montana, we have areas where we encourage smudging. It's a designated smudging spot, and I think that's been helpful for many students. So we do know that some resiliency factors that not only help like the youth that we're working with, but also help us is developing optimism. So the more optimistic someone is, the greater, I guess, power they have in combating negative situations. And optimism is something that we can learn. Take it from me, I think I'm just naturally very much a glass half empty person, right? But if we really work on it, we can be more optimistic. So the way to do that is to identify unhelpful thoughts that we're having, reframe them with more helpful thoughts, and that can help us feel more optimistic, more hopeful, more at peace. And so here's an example about, what that might look like, right? So I think I would guess that many of us from time to time have felt defeated. I mean, I have thoughts like, oh, there's no point in trying. Why am I doing this? So that's a thought that if we focus on it is unhelpful. It's not a wrong thought. It's not I'm shaking my finger at you, you shouldn't have that thought. It's just unhelpful because it releases difficult emotions. Some of those emotions might be feeling worthless or discouraged. So if we have a thought like there's no point in trying, and we feel worthless or discouraged, then what is our behavior going to look like, right? We might be rude to colleagues, we might avoid pieces of our job or avoid thinking about things. So here's an example of how to replace that with a more helpful thought. So maybe another way of looking at the situation is that even though you can't see change in the youth that you're serving, maybe you're planting a seed, right? Maybe you're planting a seed of change that might sprout growth down the road, right? And so if your thought is, hey, I'm planting seeds of change, the emotion might be more serene or hopeful, right? And if you're having thoughts like, oh, I'm planting seeds of change, feeling more serene or hopeful, your behavior might look more calm, might look more focused. So be aware, just be aware of your unhelpful thoughts during the day. We all have them. There's nothing necessarily wrong with having them, but there are times when it makes sense to really argue against those unhelpful thoughts and determine if there's another way of looking at the situation. So as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to forget those social strategies for well-being, right? Like sometimes it just would be so much easier to wrap up in a blanket after work. And sometimes we need to do that, but we can't forget about our relatives. We can't forget about our community. Sometimes just the act of being around others can boost our spirits. And social support and social skills are protective factors. So another activity is to go to that happy spot in your brain, right? So this helps with our emotions. It helps with our mental state. So we close our eyes and think of a place in our brains where we feel safe, where we feel comfortable. And we really want to spend a few moments in our positive place. What are some of the things we see? What do we hear? What's the temperature like on our skin? Knowing that we can come to this spot whenever we're feeling upset, whenever we feel like we need to recharge. Positive imagery can also be about thinking about successful moments in time. We did some deep breathing with the loving kindness exercise, right? It's simple but effective, and it can be done anywhere. Another technique that can be useful, so sometimes when working with youth who have experienced trauma, it's not uncommon to dissociate, that is to feel like our brains have left our bodies. And so a way of bringing back into the present moment is grounding. So with grounding, and I'll have you all do this now, I want you to either say out loud or think 5 things that you see. Look around, name 5 things that you see. Name 4 things that you hear. Name 3 things that you can touch. 3 things you can touch. 2 things that you can smell. What do you smell in your office? And 1 thing that you can taste. So progressive muscle relaxation is the art of tightening up a muscle group and then letting go. And this does help with tension in our body. So much like the love and kindness exercise, we would do some breathing. And then we'll do a short little version now. So I want you all to squeeze some lemons with your hands. Pretend like you're squeezing lemons really tight. so tight that you could make lemonades. Feel the tightness, move up your arms. Bring your shoulders up to your ears. Your arms and shoulders are so tight. Take a breath in. Hold your breath. Hold your muscles, and then release. And as you release your breath, you release your muscles, and you can feel that tension move from your shoulders and arms. And so progressive muscle relaxation, you just try to tighten as many muscles as you can, one at a time throughout your body. So what we'll briefly talk to you about organizational self-care. Some people shared earlier about what their organization has done to promote self-care. I think that creating activities where people feel cared about, like a sense of belonging, staff check-ins, team building activities, really being cognizant that people have their own personal lives, and there might be times when they have to step out of that work role to take care of their personal lives, and allowing time and space to do that. And I'm going to skip ahead to formal debriefing and reflection. So there is a difference between just kind of venting to your coworker, right? Like, so let's say something stressful happened and you need to be able to share. This is a process that allows you to share with your peers that goes a little bit above just venting, and it's a little bit more about reflection. So here are the steps to do that. First, you would need to have a sense of self-awareness, right? And it's called a low impact debriefing. Like, I really do need to let something out. I need to talk. I probably am going to do a couple deep breathing exercises to help me self-regulate. And then I will find someone to vent with, or excuse me, to debrief with, and I'll let that person know, hey, something very frightening happened to me, something very stressful. I need to talk about it. Do you have the time, and are you in the place to listen, right? We want to give them fair warning and give them an opportunity to say no if they're maybe not in the right place. And then we want to limit disclosure, not necessarily to only what happened, but how you were impacted. So this is what was going on with me as this was occurring. And so this is a little bit of a process that's more about reflection and debriefing than venting. Sometimes venting can just get us fired up. So those are the steps in low impact debriefing. And then I'm aware that we're out of time. And so what I wanted to do is end today with compassion, satisfaction. And I want you to just kind of reflect about your professional life and your personal life. And I want you to think of a time you connected with the child. You can maybe find compliments that you received from those you were serving, or your coworkers or administrations. I want you to think a little bit about why you chose to work in this setting. And then I want you also to think about students, youth, defendants, juveniles. You can identify who made progress. So I hope you take a second to conjure that up in your mind. And I'd like for you to think about it now, but then also after we're done with our online conference here, as you're going for a walk this evening, before you're going to bed, I want you to think of that student, that person, or that time when you felt really successful, or again, connect with why it is that you chose to do this work. And if you have a few seconds, here are some things that you can do quickly while you're at work to take care of yourself. If you got 2 minutes, you could smile. 5 minutes, you could respond to an email, or straighten up a messy area. If you have 30 minutes, you could eat lunch with your colleague. If you have 10 minutes, you could do a wellness activity. So what, again, radical self-care, what are things that you can make time for? And some things take very limited time. So there's always the opportunity to fit in self-care. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to, let's see, I think I'm turning it over to Laura, but I could be wrong.
You can turn it over to me. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or
I
Laura
turn it over
too.
to you.
Nope, Laura is just as competent to help us wrap up our day. So thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Deb, for sharing some of those skills that hopefully you can carry forward in your work. And I know, thank you, Deb, also for being at the tail end of our 2-day training. So we have had such a great group, and I know some people had to step away because we were getting closer to the end of the day, but just a big thank you for sharing all of that information. And we'll be following up with all of the participants, so they'll have your contact information. And then we were fortunate to hear from Veronica yesterday. So just reiterating that there is free training available through our partnership with NNCTC. And I think you have a big training later this week too, don't you, Deb? I think we highlighted that in our newsletter.
Yes. Thursday and Friday, we will do a multi-site training on CPITs for American Indian youth, which is an intervention that we adapted that can be done in a school setting to help junior high students recover from trauma.
So that story was highlighted. Deb shared about that training in our newsletter. So if you are not receiving our newsletter yet, I hope you'll sign up because you can learn more about the training that's going to be offered. And then I believe you all are planning on offering that in the future as well. So
yes.
We'll make sure that that information gets shared with everyone that was able to join our training event. So thank you, Deb. There is an evaluation link, so just letting you know that is in the chat box. So I hope you can complete the evaluation for this session. And then we are about to hear from one of our youth ambassadors, but just to share a closing from our TYRC team, Jacob and I are really fortunate to get to work with all of you, many other communities. I know not every single site was able to join this training, but we are looking forward to hopefully meeting some of you at the enhancement training at the end of September. And then I know we've shared throughout this training event that we're here to serve as a support to your team. So our information is available in the materials. You can also contact us by filling out a TA request on the tribalyouth.org website, and we'll get you connected with the resources and information that you're needing for your community. So just wanted to share a big thank you to all of our guests, all of the panelists that joined, our tech support. We mentioned at the start of this training, we cannot do any of these trainings without our wonderful program staff. So thank you to Laura and to Antonia, and then to our broader TYRC team for being flexible with us as we prepared for this training. So that is my closing. Jacob, I don't know if you have any closing words for the group.
Thank you all for being here with us and your participation. Appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing some of you at the enhancement training in Albuquerque.
I'm going to, Laura, are you going to reintroduce Sam? Some people might not have been on yesterday. And then we'll hand it over to Sam.
Yep, and just a note, so Anna shared, we do have that evaluation link in the chat, and there are actually 2 of them. So there's one for module 8. If you could please fill that out. And then we also are looking for everyone's feedback on just the overall training the past 2 days. So there's also a link for that. This is the first time we've put on a training like this in this way. So your feedback in response to that overall evaluation will really help us, just in thinking about how to approach bringing this to everyone in the future. So just want to say, really appreciate everyone for being here. It's been It's been a long 2 days, and it's been really good. So grateful to be with you, and we may have some new folks on. I think I will spare the long rambling introduction I gave Sam yesterday, and just share that Sam, so for anyone who wasn't with us, Sam joined us and closed us out yesterday in a great way. He serves as a Tribal Youth Resource Center youth ambassador with us, and is just an amazing human being. So I'll pass it to Sam and let him introduce himself and share some closing words.
Thank you, Laura. You know, when I was a little kid, we would all play around and get ourselves into trouble. We'd go and try and catch seagulls with fishing nets and do other things that I won't talk about. But what always grounded us, what always limited the extent to which we would go and get in trouble, was the traditional expectations of excellence that were put upon us and instilled in us by our aunts and our uncles. The realities and the values of we take care of our own first, and then we take care of ourselves. And it's that last part that I think is really important today, the part about where we take care of ourselves. I remember an elder told me that, our Yupik way of leadership is not one where somebody stands out in front and leads everybody behind them. It is the same way that the killer whale stood, and then the same way that the mainland wolf stood. And that our leader is the one that stands behind our community and ensures that our members have what they need in order to succeed. They are the one who stands behind our pack, behind our pod, and makes sure that there is nobody that is getting left behind. And if there is, you push them forward. You make sure that they have what they need to succeed. But the only way that that whale or that wolf has enough energy and enough wherewithal to be able to do that is by taking care of itself. It will always take care of itself, but it will always also make sure that it takes care of everyone else. And, we all get overwhelmed and tired with work. We all get overworked, and we all see the insurmountable problems that face our communities, and they can be overwhelming. And if we don't take time to make sure that we recenter ourselves, to make sure that we eat, then we'll get tired and we'll be the one falling behind the rest of our community. And so in the roles that each of you guys are in, that all of you are in, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. One of those traditional expectations of excellence that was instilled by every community and a lot of our young people is that you take care of yourself, is that in order to be a member of society who takes care of others, you first have to take care of yourself. And so when I see problems in front of me and issues and pieces that we have to tackle, whether it be trying to stop a company from putting powdered glass on our sea ice in the Arctic, or whether it be the state of Alaska saying that we're not allowed to hunt moose, or whether it be one of our cousins ending up in a child welfare court. It's always important to make sure that you've eaten, to make sure that you're there, to make sure that you're grounded. And from that space of being grounded, then you're immovable. Then you're able to ensure that your community has what it needs. And so we can never forget the lessons that are taught to us by our brothers and sisters. Even in times of starvation, our community would never eat killer whale. And you'd never eat wolf, or you'd never eat fox, because they were land mammals that ate meat. And the reason we never ate those whales is because we thought of them as our brothers. To be like eating your brother. And we learned a lot from them. Learn how to hunt the way that we do, our large marine mammals from them. And we also learn how to take care of ourselves and how to lead our communities. And so I leave you all with that. Make sure the knowledge that you learned here today and that was shared doesn't stay. It doesn't do any good if we just talk about it and we don't bring it home and apply it. And good luck and safe travels to back home wherever you are. Let everybody's communities be improved. Here you go.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone. Wish you a good rest of your week and look forward to reconnecting with all of you soon. So thank you, and we'll see you again next time.